All right, in this video, we're going to be taking a look at what I think will be kind of an interesting little project for you, especially if you've never done a project similar to this. So this was the mock-up that we showed our customer. They're looking for a retail counter for their new um, dine-out restaurant. So it's called Mr. Teriyaki. And what we did here, because they're on a real short deadline, they want to open up here in the next couple of days. Um, but they wanted a good looking retail counter that looked nice and professional. But I just didn't have time to build a whole counter for them. So what we did is we took one of our rental units here, and this is a bar that we normally would rent out for weddings and so forth. And we modified the rental unit by adding this extension. So the rental unit was only 6 foot long, but they needed a longer counter. So I proposed adding a little piece like we did here to the end of it, and that would give us the length. But when we added this piece, we did it as if it was intentional. Like that's the way it was built originally. So I think we succeeded in that respect. It does look good. This is some lettering that I proposed to them. They have not approved that yet, so we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus right here on our logo for right now. How we're going to go about putting this logo on the bar. Now, there's a lot of different ways to go about doing this. We could paint it directly on the bar. You could see the original bar had this metal piece, or this middle piece of trim here. So we removed it to make it easier to place the logo. Okay. So there's, like I said, there's a variety of ways we could do this. We could paint it, stencil it directly on the bar, or we could cut it out of individual shapes, and that's what I ultimately decided to propose to them. Now, what they're going to do, I'm going to deliver the bar. They're going to paint it, and either I'm going to or they're going to come back in and add the logo after it's all been painted up. So what we need to do is we need to, first of all, create all the individual pieces of the logo, but then we have to create some type of templates for them to put it all together and have everything perfectly spaced and so forth. And that's what I want to kind of walk you through a little bit. All right. So what I did here is I measured from the bottom of this trim to the top of the bottom trim, and we have 24 inches to work with. So this was the logo that was provided to me by the customer in a vector format. In this case, they provided an EPS file. And my rectangle here you can see is 24 inches tall. Okay. And then, so what I decided was I decided to make my logo 20 inches tall, which gives me 2 inches of clearance at the top and the bottom. So the first thing that we're going to do is let's go ahead and on our lettering here, I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this lettering so it's more or less, you know, straight horizontal like this. Okay. We don't have to get too particular. It doesn't have to be too precise. Just roughly. Okay. Now I have some leftover 1/8 inch material from another job that I am going to be cutting this out of. Now I also have some 12 inch by 12 inch plywood squares that we could also use. But like I said, I think I have enough scrap material from another job. We'll just use it. Okay. Now the bed of my laser, I'm working with a laser that's attached to a Shapeoko CNC machine. So my laser bed is roughly 30 inches by 30 inches. Okay, so it's a pretty decent laser bed that I have to work with. So you can see kind of how we lined up all of our lettering and then our little dot, okay, for after Mr. All right, so then we have this logo to contend with. So I'm going to give this a colored background to the backer. Okay, so let's talk. So what we're going to do here is the orange shape that you see on the screen, we're going to cut that out of 1/8" plywood, and that's going to kind of be our backer board for this logo. And you see here where the white area is sitting on top of the black. We need to cut that through. So let's do that real quick. So we're just going to use trim, and then we can get rid of the white, and now you can see that we see the backer, which is going to be white, and our face is going to be white, and this little piece of our hat is going to be white. Okay, so that all works pretty good. And then the red pieces will be individually cut. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cut out our orange piece. So that is going to be cut out just like so. Okay. And then we're going to cut out our black piece. That's all going to be one. Now, in this particular instance, I have enough scrap material to be able to cut this out. You can see it's 20 inches tall by 14 inches wide, and this one is 14 inches tall by 11, let's just call it 11 inches wide. Okay. So I have enough to do both of these as one piece. Well, what if I didn't, though? What if I didn't? What would you do? Well, let me show you what I would do. So if I did not have enough stock, we would have to take this guy and bust him up into pieces. So let's go ahead and break the curve apart. And you can see now the hat is separate. I'm going to go ahead and select all of that and recombine. So if I were to draw out a line from the hat, just draw it straight over, and then draw a rectangle from there to the bottom, how tall is that? You can see it's only 10.7 tall. So that would be tall enough that would work. So that would fit on a 12 by 12 square. So if I just remove the hat and whatever extending beyond this line that I created, then I know that that would fit on a 12 by 12 square. So watch. I just take my paint bucket tool here in CorelDRAW and click, and that fills that up. Okay, so then I'm just going to draw out a little rectangle, pull that back a little bit, and then grab my black and use trim, and where that rectangle was, I know how no longer have anything there. Okay, so now this piece here is, you see it's only 11.157, so that would definitely fit on a 12 by 12 square. So let's go ahead and make a 12 by 12 square. Okay, and then we would take this piece of the black, put it on that square, and then these pieces would also be painted black, but they'll go on a 12 by 12 square like that. Okay, so all that's going to cut out just fine on a 12 by 12 square. And then if I wanted to take some lettering here, you could see what I would do here. Again, we would just position however many letters we think we could get on there. So we could go like that. Group those together and then center them up. Same thing here. Group those together, center them. And so you can see those would fit on a 12 by 12 square. And then of course, those would fit on a 12 by 12 square. Okay, so that's kind of how we would lay it all out. In fact, we probably would just bring that up here. Because we got the room. So so far we've used up 3 squares, and we basically have everything cut the way we need to. This we cannot get on a 12 by 12 square because it's too big. Okay, but the rest of it we could break up that way if we really wanted to. All right, so our next step, but in our case, we're just going to do the black as one cut, the background as one cut. The red pieces here, okay, so those are all of our red pieces. We'll go ahead and break that apart. And then these, we can probably fit all those on one 12 by 12 piece of plywood. Now in our case, we're going to be just using all scraps. I don't think I'm going to be using any 12 by 12 squares, but it would all fit on there if that's what we ultimately decided to do. Okay. What I'll do is I will link in the video description below, I will link to the 12 by 12 plywood squares I buy. They're 1/8 of an inch thick. And then I will also link to the plywood that I buy in 4 by 8 sheets at Home Depot. Okay, just so you know exactly what I'm going to be using and cutting. Now, the next thing that comes up is a tricky part. This shape here is going to ultimately be painted white. And then we need to fit all of these red shapes. We need to fit all of those red shapes and position them perfectly within this shape to ultimately make our sign. And likewise, the black here, we need to position it perfectly also within this orange shape. But how do we do that? How are we going to be able to do that? Because I need to be able to paint this white and then position the black within this exactly where I want it to be. Now, and so the only really way to do this is to create a template in order to do that. And that's what I'm going to attempt to show you and explain to you in some way that makes sense. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. You'll probably wind up developing your own way to do it eventually. But for right now, I'm just going to show you one thought process. So imagine that this is painted white, and then you can see that the next easiest thing to position is the black. We need to position the black somehow on this white. And we can't just, well, just eyeball it and, call it close enough. No, we don't want to just eyeball it. Okay? So we want to be able to position this somehow on top of our white backer, but with some precision. So how are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to show you one concept. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw a line from this red shape right to the corner there. And then I'm going to draw this line all along the black shape here. Okay. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to draw it right from here, straight across like that. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do there. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, I think, is I am going to temporarily move this over so I have just that. And then I'm going to fill that. Something is off. Aha, that's off right there. So I'm just going to take this and move that down. There's a little bit of a gap there. What's it look like on the bottom? The bottom, there might be a gap too, but let's just go ahead and mitigate that. Let's try it now. There we go. Okay. So here's my thought process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. I'm going to go ahead and paint it white. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. You can see it's 9.6 by 3, so it's not very big. But then I'm going to take the point of this and I'm going to position it right there at the corner. That is a hard spot. That is a permanent spot. It's going to be easiest to line those two up. And we're going to line this up on the outer edge because it's going to be cut the exact same way, right? So then when I come to bring my black piece over, how am I going to line my black piece? Well, I know this piece is aligned to this, and I know that this corner right there at that corner is going to line up, boop, right to that corner. Okay, and as long as this whole piece is right along this edge, then we know that this is perfectly positioned within our white piece. And that's exactly what we need. And then once that is positioned, then we could just move that out of our way because we no longer need it. Okay? So that's the good part. So now what we have to do is we have to perfectly position all of our red pieces. Okay? So that's the next step. How do we go about perfectly positioning our red pieces? Because we have a situation where our red pieces are going to connect to our black. So if our black is positioned perfectly, then you could see that we could just pick this up and we know that's going to go right there. It goes right there. This piece is in between all of our black, right? So it is definitely going to just snap right into place. Same thing here. This one is going to snap right into place because that's just how that's all connected. This one here, we can connect it down here and we can connect it here, so that one's fine. Same thing with this one. It's going to ride right up against here. It's going to ride up against there. So the only piece of red that we're going to have to eyeball is that last piece, which that shouldn't be that big a deal to make sure that that margin is the same going around there. So all we need for a extra template is that little guy to be able to place our black. Because we know we're going to go right there at that corner, follow the contour, and wherever it ends, it ends. And that's it. And then we'll be able to place our black piece in place. So that's going to be really, really straightforward. So yeah, so that is all there is to that. Now, if we were going to cut it out like this, we'd have to do a little bit more work. But in our particular case, we're going to cut this out all as one. Now, there is a bit of a challenge here because this piece, the top of his hat is separate from here. But I think we can eyeball that enough where it's not going to be that big of a challenge to be able to place that. So you see here, so what we could do is we could place the main black piece and then we can place the red piece and then the red piece will kind of help us place the other black piece. So you see what I'm saying there? So that'll be pretty straightforward. I'm going to show you all this when we actually get to putting the sign together. Now, we've got up to this point here. So we know that's our black template placement piece. We could probably fit that. So we could probably move this down, move these down, and we can rotate this and position that just like so. This we can rotate, doesn't have to be like that. There we go. Now you see here, we've got some kind of weird, we're going to clean that up a little bit. So there we go, there's that. Nothing over there. Okay, so now that's all cleaned up. So yes, so this can cut just like this. No problems there. That can cut like that. We got all of our red pieces that we're going to cut. So that's all that is taken care of. Now, there's more to the puzzle. So at this point, we have everything figured out for the logo and what our cut pieces are going to be for that. But now what we need to do is we need to figure out some type of template to place the Mr. Teriyaki and our completed logo, okay, onto the bar. How do we do that? Well, let me show you how I'm going to do it. I don't know how other people would do it, but I'll show you how I would do it. So first things first, I am going to set my nudge value to 1 inch, and I am going to move this up as much as I can in 1 inch increments before I get to the text. So you see there, it's before I get to the text. And how much did I move it up? I moved it up, in this case, 5 inches. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through. So I'm going to grab my oval tool, and I'm just going to create an oval. And all I'm going to do here is just kind of manipulate my oval here. And what I want to do is in my oval, I want my oval, the letters to slightly be within this oval. So you could see that all of my letter bottoms are within that oval. You see that going all the way around, right? So that's what I want. So that's excellent. And then what I want to do is grab my rectangle tool, and I want to cut off the bottom part of my oval right there at that 5 inch line. So go ahead and trim that down. And so now you can see that that is in fact taken care of, right? So I am going to go ahead and there we go. Okay. So I just moved that yellow oval kind of to the back here because I want to be able to see this a little bit better. So I need my logo to all be one piece, but I do not want to include that yellow. So I grouped it together, so you can see it is now grouped together, right? So then I'm going to do a contour to the outside, but only a 1/16 of an inch, 0.0625. So we're going to do 0.625. Okay, so that's a 1/16 of an inch offset there. Not much of an offset, but enough for what I need to do. Okay, so we're going to break that contour group apart. And then we're going to take that purple that I just created, that purple offset that I just created, and we're going to trim our yellow shape. Okay, so now I don't need this purple because all we did was create a little bit of a space. Okay, so now we're going to have this template that if we place it perfectly on our bar 5 inches up from our bottom trim, that we'll be able to set our letters within that template all the way around. And then, of course, our main logo piece will be cut out of that template. And then we could just remove the template because we don't need that anymore. Okay? So that's how we would go about creating that template. Now, we're not done. So let me show you another problem, if you will. So you can see how we'll be able to set those letters right inside these shapes and line everything up perfectly. Okay? So that's all going to work out real well. Now, let's take a look at how big this is. This is currently 14 inches wide and is 21 inches tall. Okay? So that is okay. But we are either going to want to cut it on 12-inch by 12-inch squares or smaller scrap material that I have. So let me show you how we're going to do this where it makes sense for us. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. We have a break in our template that we need to take care of. So let me show you how we're going to do this, and hopefully I can this is all going to make sense when it all comes together here. We'll get it all cut out and then show you how it all goes together. And then I think it really for sure will make sense. So we're going to just take this and we're going to cut it right there. Okay? Do we want to do that? Maybe we'll cut it. Let's see here. Let's cut it right there. Okay? So what we're going to do is grab our paint bucket tool and we're going to fill that, 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 and that. Okay? So all of those pieces, we're going to have no fill, but we are going to have an outline. So let's move that down. Okay, so back to our squares. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try and take this piece and fit it on our square. And then we're going to take this piece and fit it on our square. And then the reason that we created this little spacer was so that when we put this together, that this last piece will be able to space it perfectly apart. Now this piece here, we got to get creative with it to be able to fit on a 12 by 12 square by going at it a bit of an angle here. So let's see there. That fits. Oops, we centered that. We don't want to. Okay, so we got all these cut out. So that's how all that's going to work. Okay, now I don't know exactly how I'm going to cut this out, but that is essentially how this is all going to work out. So let's kind of rebuild this arch, if you will, so you can hopefully understand how this would all come together. So these pieces will be cut out, so we can get rid of our square. And so what we would do is we just come over here, and so then this piece here, right, is going to connect. So we'll connect this piece, and then we would physically rotate it. So those two are connected like that. And then we would take our spacer, right, and we would connect it. And then lastly, we take this piece here. So this piece is going to be there. We'll rotate it there. And then we're just going to rotate this down. Okay, so that's not the right spot. So this piece is going to go there. We will rotate it from that corner and then till those two line up, right? And all I would use is painter's tape on the front and back to loosely hold those together. And remember that we had this 5 inches. So what I would do is I'm actually going to go ahead and cut me just a little spacer there. So this can only be let's do 5 inches, but let's do 10 inches wide. Okay, and we'll do 2 of them. So I'm going to measure the center of my bar. That's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to put one of these spacers on top of my bottom trim at dead center, right? And then I can take this and place it on my spacers. But in order to do that, I want this to be perfectly centered. So how would I go about making sure that those were perfectly centered? Well, it's easy enough to do. So we'll make those perfectly centered. Okay. And then all I'm going to do is drag out a little circle. And I think what I'll do is I'll do that on both of them, like that. Or I could just make this, oh, let's just do it that way. That'll be easier. We'll just make that slightly, that'll be easier. So the end of that will line up to the end of my spacer. And then we'll know that that's perfectly centered. Okay. So imagine me just coming in here and I want to line up my text. So what I would do is I would grab this M that I cut and I'm just gonna very carefully place it. We know that there's a 1/16 of an inch gap there, right? So then for my R, right, I'm just gonna rotate it. And I said, oh, that's not a equal spacing, so it's not quite rotated enough. That's getting close. A little bit more, right? Nope, that's not going to work. A little bit more rotation, a little bit less rotation. But I'm going to be doing this, physically by hand and say, okay, that's close enough. Now, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But I don't think it needs to be either. It just needs to be close enough. And we would just continue that whole process all the way around. And then at some point, we don't need our spacer anymore. And we don't need this spacer anymore. So we don't need that spacer. Once we get all of our text in place, then all we have to do is drop in our logo piece as one unit. And then we can just go ahead and remove all of those. Okay, and that's it. So pretty straightforward. I know that doesn't seem very straightforward, but that will help us get all of our placement the way we need it to on the bar. So hopefully that helps you out with your projects. Thanks for watching.